Wow. I just want to say wow. It is such an honor to be here on behalf of my legendary colleague and soon-to-be co-anchor, Wolf Blitzer. I still have to pinch myself, honestly, that I'm going to be his co-anchor. Watching that video, thinking I get to sit at the anchor desk with him, covering world events every day. It is something that I still haven't fully processed and comprehended. Wolf represents the best of CNN and the best of journalism. He truly does. I know how much he wants to be here, how honored he is to be recognized for this Walter Cronkite Excellence in Journalism Award, given how much Cronkite shaped him as a journalist. A few weeks ago, I was in the CNN green room and I ran into him and he was getting ready to go do the interview. You just saw clips of it. And he said, I received the Walter Cronkite Award. And this is someone who has had this amazing career. He's received so many awards, but this, you could tell, impacted him and meant the world to him more than anything. He was so proud of it, and he couldn't wait to come out here and accept it. And to be here on his behalf truly means so much to me. And I know, as you heard, he's going to plan a trip out here, so you'll get to meet him then and have a good time with him. But he explained to me in that green room why it meant so much. He said, Walter Cronkite was someone I grew up with. I used to go in every night with my family and watch him on the evening news. So his influence lives on through journalists like Wolf, to younger generations like me, and to the very students like Phineas that I've had the pleasure of meeting with. Let me just tell you, those students that I have met with give me so much hope and optimism for the future of this great profession. And Phineas, you're right, there is so much opportunity. So much opportunity. And so thank you to everyone in this room as well for supporting those students and for supporting the faculty, because it matters more than ever to train them and to get them out and to report verified information in this world of misinformation that we're living in. So thank you to everyone in this room for your support, and to students like Phineas. I'm just so impressed. I first met Wolf as a young kid, and I remember sort of looking up to him as this mythical creature. His name was Wolf, his real name, by the way. He had this stark white beard, and he was one of the most famous newscasters in the world. And when I would watch him on CNN with my parents, just as Wolf would watch Cronkite with his parents, I was in awe of him. And I thought to myself as a young kid, what an amazing job that would be to go on TV and share information about current events to help people better understand the world around them. What a dream. Well, it turns out that childhood dreams can come true. And as mentioned, I'll soon be anchoring the Situation Room with him on CNN. And I can't wait to learn from one of the very best journalists of my lifetime, who embodies these same values Cronkite did. Fealty to the truth, no matter who it favors, strong integrity and ethics, a sturdy, steady force amid the turmoil of the world, and a tireless work ethic. I think we can all agree that it feels like home when we watch Wolf Blitzer delivering the news to us, even in delivering news that can feel so sad, so tragic in this turmoil of the world. It feels like home watching Wolf. I have watched him work all hours. I know my colleagues here from CNN can attest to that. Working weekends. He worked my 11 a.m. hour while I was on maternity leave this last year. Then did his 6 p.m. show every day without complaint. He would always say, I'm feeling strong, even after he was putting in 20-hour days, day after day. And I would ask him how he keeps up his stamina. Like, how are you always feeling so strong, Wolf? And he would say, when you're young, you work. That's another one of his lines. I always love that. Many of you may recall one of his most iconic moments last year enjoying a Wolf Spritzer at a brunch spot in D.C. He posted about it on X. And then less than 2 hours later, he was in the anchor seat as the face of CNN when former President Biden stepped down from the race, changing the presidential run. and history forever. That moment may have gone viral as a lesson to not check your work email on the weekends, but for those of us who know Wolf, it embodies his endless drive and love, truly, for breaking news, which, as we all know, news doesn't stop after business hours. I remember getting the call after the attempted assassination on Donald Trump, and Eric Sherling called me and said, "Get to the set, go sit next to Wolf." And so I ran to the CNN bureau on a Saturday, and I sat next to Wolf for hours on end covering that breaking news. And just watching him and his steadiness during that, he was truly unflappable during this breaking news when we were all trying to comprehend what just happened. And in those situations, sometimes you're having to fill airtime, you don't have all the facts, you're trying to understand it, and Wolf was a pro's pro, and watching him, learning from him, was incredible for me, and I can't wait to continue that. He is always up to the task of fulfilling his sacred duty as a journalist to speak truth to power and communicate the facts against the strong headwinds journalists face in this time. He has already left an indelible mark in our field, and that mark continues to grow. Journalists like him matter more than ever, and this recognition could not go to a more deserving colleague, person, and journalist than Wolf. He is truly, at his core, also the nicest person you have ever met, and I mean that. He is just a genuinely warm, kind person who cares about everyone. So without further ado, let's hear more from Wolf himself.
Thank you so much for this truly amazing honor. I so wish I could be there with all of you today, but unfortunately I've come down with the flu, and my doctor has recommended that I don't travel right now. A special thanks to my colleague and good friend Pamela Brown for flying out to Phoenix to accept the award on my behalf. She's the best. I do want to say how deeply humbled I am to receive the Walter Cronkite Award for excellence in journalism. I am so privileged to have such a meaningful career reporting the news to viewers here in the United States and around the world. I am so honored to work with the best journalists in the business, some of whom you saw in that piece. Thank you to everyone here at Arizona State University and the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication for this recognition. And most importantly, thank you for all that you do to teach and encourage the next generation of journalists and instill in them the timeless values embodied by Walter Cronkite. Let's give a big round of applause to this truly extraordinary school and to all the amazing faculty and students here today. There are so many people to thank for helping me reach this moment, but it seems fitting that I should begin with Walter Cronkite himself. The Blitzers were like so many Americans back in the day. We tuned in to see Walter Cronkite anchor the CBS Evening News without fail. Picture it. There was young Wolf Blitzer, yes, and to anyone who still wonders, that is my real name. Though back then I didn't have the trademark beard. So there I am sitting at the kitchen table at our home in Buffalo, New York, with my parents, David and Sesha Blitzer, and my older sister, Helena. The four of us would watch Walter Cronkite on our small black and white television during dinner. And we'd keep watching until his nightly sign-off, and that's the way it is. Then we'd discuss the major headlines. My parents were passionate about the news. They were news junkies before anyone used that term. As Holocaust survivors and immigrants to the United States, they were so grateful for all this country had to offer, including a free and fair press. For them and for me, Walter Cronkite stood for truth, trust, fairness, and the critical role information can and should play in upholding democracy. With Walter Cronkite's help, my parents instilled in me a lifelong fascination with current events, domestic politics, and global affairs, and an unwavering appreciation of the First Amendment. I so wish my parents could be here today to see me receive this award bearing the name of our mutual hero. Thank you, Mom and Dad, and thanks to Walter Cronkite. I never could have imagined back then that I'd be associated in any way with Walter Cronkite, let alone actually getting the chance to interview him, which I did multiple times over the years, including in his role as a CNN contributor. Perhaps the most memorable interview was back on June 6, 1994. It was the 50th anniversary of D-Day. Walter Cronkite and I stood together on historic Omaha Beach, and he recounted his experience as a pool reporter for United Press International during World War II, covering the events of D-Day from a B-17 some 12,000 feet above the action. I asked him what would have happened if there had been live television coverage then. He raised concern about real-time reporting exposing troop movements to the enemy, but he was adamant that the U.S. military must allow journalists and cameras on the ground in combat zones so the public can eventually see the images and get a fuller, truer picture of the realities of war. When I think about that conversation and about Walter Cronkite, I am mindful of all of our colleagues who have risked their lives as war correspondents, from the greatest war to current wars, including most recently in the Middle East and in Ukraine. Our thoughts are with them always. I'm also struck by how much our industry has changed over these years. All of us, journalism, professionals, teachers, students, are heading into uncharted territory. We are racing to keep up with the changing technology. News organizations like CNN are trying to figure out what news will look like in the next 5, 10, or another 20 years and adopt. It's not easy. All the eager students here today will enter a field that is vastly different than when Walter Cronkite got his start or when I did. And that takes me back to my own early days in noon, when Apple was just a fruit and TikTok was the sound that a clock made. After getting a master's degree at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies here in Washington, D.C., my first job was with the Reuters news agency in their Tel Aviv bureau. It was an entry-level position, barely above an intern. I was a reporter in training, and boy, did I have a lot to learn. Fortunately, I had a terrific boss, an old-school British journalist who taught me the fundamentals. Stick to the facts, report them accurately and fast, and ideally be first with the story. I followed his advice and got my first big break in 1973, reporting on the first ever visit by a German chancellor to Israel. Willy Brandt's helicopter was swept toward the edge of a cliff atop Masada by a sudden desert wind, and he narrowly escaped. I was able to report the story before anyone else because my boss had tipped me off about where to find a nearby pay phone. Yes, a pay phone. Some of you here remember pay phones, many of you don't. That was the only way that for a wire service reporter like me to get the news out fast. We literally phoned it in. As a young reporter, I worked hard, and I was lucky, though as my dad would say, I also made my own luck. In the late 70s, I was working for the Jerusalem Post. I was the Post's one-man Washington bureau. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat came to Washington, and at a news conference, I asked him essentially why he wasn't doing more to pursue his stated goal of peace with Israel. Later that year, he made an unprecedented trip to Jerusalem to address the Israeli Knesset, and he credited my question with inspiring his decision. It helped me realize that I could really make a difference doing a job I so loved. I know many of you in this room feel that way as well. Eventually, Ted Turner called, and I was on the front line of another revolution in journalism, the early days of 24/7 cable news. Ted Turner also changed my life, big time. I am so grateful to Ted for hiring me at CNN nearly 35 years ago. Grateful that he was confident that I'd be a good television reporter when up until then I primarily worked in print. Once again, I had a lot to learn. And to be honest, I briefly wondered if this TV gig was for me. But fortunately, I was mentored by the giants of the industry. Ted Turner gave me a bit of advice I have followed every day since then. Remember, Wolf, Ted told me, the news comes first. I also learned so much from the late Bernie Shaw, who was CNN's lead anchor when I started at the network, and from CNN's president of that era, Tom Johnson. It is no coincidence that all three of those men are past recipients of the Walter Cronkite Award. and I am so deeply indebted to them for their support, their guidance, and their friendship. I urge all of you who are just starting out in news to find a wise, experienced mentor or mentors like I did and learn from them. During my first weeks and months at CNN, I was starting to get the hang of it all, working as CNN's Pentagon correspondent when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait in August of 1990. The U.S. went to war with Iraq, and in early 1991, Bernie Shaw, along with CNN's Peter Arnett and John Holloman, made history as the so-called Boys of Baghdad, reporting live from Iraq as the first bombs fell. The cable news network took off, and so did my career. There have been so many important stories we have covered since then. Too many wars, hopeful moments of peace, elections, scandals, political upheavals. If I shared an anecdote for every one of them, and believe me, I have them, we'd be here for hours. Through it all, I've had the proverbial front row seat to history, and so I've always said yes to any and every assignment, as my wife Lynn can attest. Thanks to Lynn and my daughter Alana for their love and patience over the years. When CNN asked me to go to Kuwait City to cover the second Gulf War, I said yes. When CNN asked me to go to Fallujah in Iraq to cover the aftermath of that brutal battle, I said yes. When CNN asked me to go to Pyongyang, North Korea, to report on a visit by the late Bill Richardson to free hostages, I said yes. And more recently, when CNN asked me to go to Israel after the October 7th attack, I said yes. I vividly remember when CNN asked me to interrupt my first family vacation after the Persian Gulf War. Spoiler alert, I said yes. I traveled to Moscow to report on the failed Soviet coup and subsequent collapse of the Soviet Union. I was there when Mikhail Gorbachev signed his resignation as Soviet president. But there was a glitch. His Soviet-made pen didn't work. It was awkward. Enter CNN's Tom Johnson, who was with us in Moscow. Tom lent Gorbachev his pen, a black Mont Blanc ballpoint. With that pen, Tom wrote his own chapter in world history, and he got himself quite the keepsake. With love to my family, it was worth skipping the vacation. By 2005, I had been a senior White House correspondent and had anchored multiple shows, including Late Edition and Wolf Blitzer Reports, which CNN then redefined TV news again. We launched a little show called The Situation Room that is still on the air nearly 20 years later. I want to thank one of our first executive producers, CNN Executive Vice President of Programming, Eric Sherling, and my current executive producer, who has been on our show since the almost beginning in various positions, Emily Atkinson. Also, a special shout out to our very talented and dedicated Situation Room staff, and to so many other colleagues who have helped me look good over the years, including Amy Antelis, CNN Executive Vice President for Talent and Content Development, CNN Director of Communications, Dylan Rose Geerlings, and my longtime agent and friend, Michael Glantz. The launch of the Situation Room was another huge personal milestone, but it's another example of the whirlwind changes in TV news since its inception in the Cronkite era. The Situation Room broke new ground with our wall of TV screens that I stood in front of instead of sitting at a Cronkite-like desk, not to mention how we tapped into the still relatively young internet in new ways, taking viewers, quote, inside the blogs and using new touchscreen technology. It may sound quaint now, after 2 decades, but it was a big deal, part of the rapid-paced and ongoing evolution of electronic journalism. As journalists, we face all sorts of new challenges, including the pressure of reporting in the current political environment. I am not the first person to tell you that journalism is more important than ever. Facts matter. The First Amendment matters, and democracy requires a free press that is willing to speak truth to power. We are in a constant fight to remain vigilant. We have a huge responsibility. The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication and other J schools across the country also have a huge responsibility, and so do their students. All of us are looking to you to help preserve journalism and its integrity. The future depends on it. Our country is depending on you. No matter how people consume the news in years to come, on TV, on their phones or laptops, or who knows, maybe virtual reality, the method of communication will change, but the principles of journalism should not. Walter Cronkite told it like it was. He was once heralded as the most trusted man in America. We know public trust in our institutions is not what it used to be, but Walter Cronkite's legacy remains alive and strong, and I accept this award in Walter Cronkite's honor. I can only hope there is a young, aspiring journalist out there, maybe a few, maybe some in this room, who have watched me report the news and who said to themselves, I want to do what he does. I want to make sure people know and see and understand what is happening in their country, in their community, and around the world. And who knows, maybe one of them will be up here someday. It would make me so proud, and I hope your decision to honor me would have made Walter Cronkite proud. So let me say thank you once again. I really appreciate this honor.